Well, I want to welcome you this afternoon. It's a privilege for me to have you all here to hear this outstanding, talented artist, Paul Hamilton. You know, I've known Paul.
Thank you.
I've known Paul a lot of years, and when I first saw his work, there was that emotional connection that I felt right away. And I knew he was enormously talented, and I knew that if we got him here at the gallery, he would be our outstanding artist, and he has been. So I want to start with we want to take a journey, and it's going through his career. And I want to start with his early years. And he was born in California, then your family, because your dad was connected with the Nassau program, you moved to Florida, right?
I did, yeah. Do you want me to elaborate on that?
Sure.
I could,
Sure.
because I can. Well, first of all, thanks for coming. This is amazing to see this many people here and to listen to this story, which it is in its own right a pretty interesting story. I grew up in Cocoa Beach, Florida, which is, we all know that's where the Kennedy Space Center is located. So I was, I think when they landed on the moon, I might have been 3 years old. So I grew up with all that exploration and the space program, and the race to the moon was not only just on TV, but it was in our backyards. So we as a family, that was our life. You know how when you're that close to something, it permeates everything you do. And I very much at an early age became very engaged with the idea of exploration and looking and reaching and staring upward. And there was a lot of times that I probably didn't really know it, but that idea was just embedded in me as far as, you know, as a child, like to go out and explore and search and discover new things, because that was like the air of the time. And I spent very much of my early years in Florida outside doing just that, exploring and looking and becoming engaged in the landscape around me.
And that's one of the strong points, is that if you travel with Paul, he sees things, the shaft of light on a building or a single tree in a landscape, that most people don't even observe. Who were the family influences? I know you came from a very scientific family. Your dad was part of the Nassau program. Your sister's in the medical field. Your brother is part of the missile defense program. Ed, you weren't born with a slide rule. You were born with a paintbrush.
Calculator.
So who were the early influences?
Yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint, other than if my mom was here, she would be happy to tell you it was her. She very much, her mother was an outstanding artist in her own right. She very much could do anything creatively and constantly was, this is my grandmother, doing crafts, and she would take a lot of stuff with nature. So she would do, she would take these sticks and carve them out and then paint them like snakes. So we have this collection grown up of all the different snakes made out of wood, pretty neat. And she collected bird eggs and bird feathers, and she fed the robins and the birds. She was very much into the nature and the environment around them. The only thing with her is she lived in Colorado, and I lived in Florida, so I didn't spend an awful lot of time with her. But our house was full of stuff that she had made. Our kitchen had her paintings and her sculptures and stuff in it. And therefore, my mom sort of took after her and tried to do some painting. And since my mom's not here, she can't speak for her, but she would tell you that she stopped painting about the time I started painting, because she just couldn't handle it. She's like, his paintings were just so good, and I just couldn't, And so so although she was very artistic, she didn't really have a lot. She sort of just passed the baton to me. It's like, I think you better take over, because she said when I started critiquing her paintings at age 6 and 7, she was like, she knew she needed to just let me go and do my thing. But my mother has always been the biggest supporter, and I don't know if influence is the right word, but very much she would wake up when I'd knock on the door after finishing a drawing or a painting at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'd say, I got it done, what do you think? And she'd, oh, it's good, and then she'd go back to bed. But, so she was always very excited. She made sure for Christmas I got all the pastels and paints and brushes I could find. And one of the funny things is that we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and I was just burning through art supplies like left and right, and she decided one day that if she just kept all the grocery bags, she could just give me the grocery bags, and then I can just draw on that. And that actually was started something for me, because it was like, well, this is kind of neat, these drawings on these old paper bags. You know, they'd be wrinkly, and some have the logo of them, and I would just draw around them, and it really just gave me an opportunity to create. They always gave me a format to create. Our kitchen table ended up becoming my workbench, and that was not very good at the time, because it was a pretty nice table, but I ended up doing all my crafts and hot glue and the whole thing, and it was covered with paint. But it was just sort of understood. I don't know if they were totally pleased with that, but they still have that table today, but they did have to refinish it. So.
Well, Paul, I know you were encouraged all through grammar school and high school to paint, and I know you received a lot of offers from different art schools. Why Ohio? Why the Columbus College of Art and Design? How did you decide on that?
Well, yeah, growing up in Florida, I was pretty
Other than a full scholarship.
Yeah, well, there's no other reason. Growing up in Florida, I was very much isolated. I knew of one season, I knew of one experience, and I enjoyed that, and I loved it. And at the time, I was looking for colleges, and there was not that many good schools in Florida for art. There's a few. The Ringling School of Art, it was a good school, and I looked at that school. Savannah, which is up in Georgia, is a very good school. But CCAD, and I applied to those schools, but CCAD did give me a pretty hearty scholarship. So without thinking too much, as I was a 19-year-old kid or 18 years old, I was like, sounds good to me. So I did. We drove out here. My parents drove us up here, and I had really no recollection of any winters or anything like that. And it was fall by the time we had got here, because school had started a little bit later, and the leaves had already changed by the time. And it was just, from that point on, I had never seen the environment so fluid and changing, other than an occasional hurricane, which was somewhat daunting. I mean, it turned from this green into the leaves falling and the foliage changing, and I think that really just opened my eyes up to a whole world of inspiration, and I immediately became extremely engaged in this new atmosphere, which was just so different. It's hard to explain how different that would be to grow up in a place like Florida, and then come to a place like Ohio, where it's farms and trees and old barns. The oldest
snow.
And snow. Snow hadn't happened yet. The oldest building where I grew up was probably 1960 or maybe 55 or something. So I saw old brick buildings and neighborhoods like German Village and even some of the old downtown buildings. It was just, to me, it was very new. And then the art museum, we didn't really, where I grew up, didn't have much in the way of the arts. And I became very, not to mention going to school and learning about all these different painters and art movements and stuff that I was, but I was also in a new environment. So I think that really had a lot to do with it. So that kind of leads us to the next thing.
Which is, I first met Paul in the early 90s, And of course, when I went to his studio, I was immediately impressed. I mean, the paintings just took my breath away. So we at that time had the Festival Gallery in Lancaster during the Lancaster Festival. And we did an exhibition called 10 from Ohio. And among the artists were Jim Dine and April Gornick, very international artists, and Paul Hamilton. And it was interesting because we got a great review. They were very impressed with the artists that we had secured. However, when people came back to revisit that show, he did 4 major landscape canvases. And I began to see that he had this emotional connection with people. They looked at his work and they felt a part of it. And that's what a true artist is, that he engages the viewer, that they can become. So the 10 from Ohio was a really wonderful show. Then we moved up here and we did My Ohio, which you did all Ohio landscapes.
Yeah.
And it was a sold out show.
It was a great, well, for me, I had done all these things. I had painted, I had traveled, I had painted in the back of my truck, and I had been throughout all Ohio looking at all these new and exciting things. It was so fresh and new to me. And I had just barely met Marlena, maybe a year before. And, I had such a body of work and such a passion to paint. Yet there wasn't really a resource or an outlet for me. I had just a lot of stuff. Paintings under the bed, paintings in closets, paintings in maybe a coffee shop or something. But I didn't really have any sort of representation or anyone that to kind of hold my hand in a way and take care of me, because really all I was doing was just focusing on painting. And that's where this show, Marlena had seen my work and we had met for the first time, and there was just like when she mentioned she saw my work for the first time, she felt something. I felt the same when I met Marlena for the very first time. She had a passion about my work. I always had a passion about my work. I wasn't too worried about that. But it's good to see somebody else, and not to mention a gallery owner. And the Hammond Gallery has had a great reputation. And then the idea that when Marlena says, well, I'm going to open up this new gallery, I've had a gallery for 20 years, but I want to move into Bexley. And she gave me the whole gallery to open her new show. And that show was called My Ohio. That really speaks a lot to Marlena and where she's at as a gallery owner, and how dedicated she is to her artists and the people that she believes in. And everybody here, Laura, where's Laura? She's back there somewhere.
Yeah.
She's and she was there. She's been with you ever since.
She's been with me for 20 years.
Yeah. So not only did I do an exhibition here, but I started a family and a friendship, that's gone for a long time.
Yes.
So I owe a ton to Marlena, because without any artist, without some sort of venue, you're at a loss.
Well, let's talk about Martha's Vineyard.
She doesn't want to talk about this.
Yeah, I do.
She wants to talk about me.
I want to talk about him.
Okay.
Let's talk about Martha's Vineyard. Your first show there in 2000, which was remarkable. And Martha's Vineyard attracts people from all over the world. And it was, people that we did a show just with Paul. It was absolutely incredible. The reaction. Again, people from Europe, from the East Coast, West Coast, all of had the same connection with his work.
Yeah, and that to me was, as we talked about, I came from Florida, so very coastal, a lot of exploration, a lot of water, a lot of being outside, a lot of boating and all that kind of stuff. And when I went to the Vineyard for the first time, I really didn't know what to expect. I had heard of Martha's Vineyard, sounds like a pretty nice place.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what to expect, and when I got there, it was the same thing as when I came to Ohio. It was a brand new place, and I just explored all day long into the night, painting the whole time. looking for different ways to capture the atmosphere and the feel of the location. And that's, I guess, something that comes through in my paintings is I'm not really concerned about just painting the structure or the tree, but the feeling of that structure or that tree. And I actually teach some painting now, and I try to teach that thought of when you're out and you're looking, try to paint not only what it is, but what it feels like it is. So the emotional aspects of an old boat, or the emotional aspects of a house with the windows open. And that turned out to be an excellent show for me, because it was the first time I really connected back with the coastal type of painting. And I'd done tons of paintings from on the beach in Florida, but this is the first time I was painting like old-fashioned things, like old boathouses and that kind of classic American style painting.
You've reconnected with the Vineyard too.
Yep, went there this past summer. Amy and I. She's right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we went back to the Vineyard. We exhibited there with Marlena for nearly 10 years. Did a show every year, which, if you think about it, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of time to be doing that. And the results were amazing. We always look forward to the Martha's Vineyard show and those paintings and that body of work. Never really abandoned Ohio, because I'm still here and I still am totally engaged in the landscape here. But it was a nice sort of a second project to have. And we didn't go there for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then started back again this past year, exhibiting out there again. So it's,
You're going back?
And I'm going back. So look forward to that again. I'm looking at your thing there. What's next?
Your 3 New York one-man shows.
Yeah. So as if Martha's Vineyard wasn't good enough, pretty neat place. And then Marlena, who I owe everything to Marlena, but she's had such a passion about my work. And she's always said, you know what, I go to these galleries in New York, and none of them are doing what you're doing. Your stuff is so powerful, and people connect with it, and you see this and you see that, and it's just, and she's like, you need to be in New York. And she's like, I'm getting you a show in New York. And I was like, well, I hope so. That sounds good. I've always just kind of like, okay, great, and then I'm busy doing my paintings and working as hard as I can. And I do work an awful lot. I can't stop working. So the idea to stop and think and ponder on maybe an exhibit somewhere, someplace, it doesn't really happen that much, which is good, because Marlena had a gallery in New York that she thought I would do well at, and she ended up being right. That first show, I mentioned my parents once or twice in this, and they for a long time they would come to every gallery opening, no matter where it was. They had their van and they would travel, and they would be at every gallery opening. And to see their son on Madison Avenue, right across from the Carlisle Hotel and the David Finley Gallery, I think was almost too much for him. And I feel good for myself, because I accomplished something great. But I feel like I kind of gave back a little bit to my parents, because now as a parent, I know what that feels like. You want your kid to be happy and do good things, and to walk in that gallery and see my parents standing there, and it was just amazing. And we did it for.
And your dad said during that show, and I think his father, he was amazed at what Paul could do, but there was always that apprehension, because he was the scientific one. So he came up to me during that show and he said, he is really good. And I thought that was so touching.
Well, and
he also liked all the red dots that he saw.
Yeah. Another thing about my dad, which is good. If you had ever met my dad, he's there in Florida right now still. So, but he takes it all in. He talks and stuff, but he likes to look and observe. And I did that show at the Decorative Arts Center, and I said, Dad, we should go look at my show. and he came up, and we drove out there, and it was just him and I, because I think he got in late or something. And we looked at the whole show, walked him through it, and he, no word. He got in the car, drove back. He wasn't like, well, that was neat or fun, or he might have said we should get something to eat, and we got home, and I'm thinking, well, I tried. And later on that night, we were just sitting around, we had a campfire, and he said, you know what? I just still can't find the right words to say. Oh. And he just didn't know what to say. And he didn't want to just say, hey, that was cool, because he's like, well, that won't do it. Because that was a neat thing for them to see, too, the Decorative Art Center before it was refurbished. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Great.
It
was really a wonderful show.
So there's been a lot of moments like that throughout my career where I feel like I'm doing the right thing. You never know if you are, and painting is actually a very selfish act. Like you have to carve out time for yourself, and you have to be in your studio, and you can't be bothered. But I do feel like I am giving back when I hear things like that. And
well, you've also had you've been accepted the last 4 years in the show at the Butler Museum of American Art, and you won the top award.
I did.
The Field to Kind Award. And then you've gone on, we've had shows at the Franklin Park Conservatory, which was a sold-out show. Now I want to talk about future projects, because if you notice the painting behind me, this is a departure. It's something completely new. So you can talk about OSU, the new medical center, has bought a lot of Paul's paintings, but they came to him with a request, and he said yes. Do you want to show them?
Well, I'll talk about it a little bit. The medical center, we know what that's all about. It's going to be the biggest and the best and the brightest of all cancer research hospitals. And they had this idea, and when you design a building or a place or a structure, they like to have the emotion also in these places. So the idea that it's a peaceful environment, it's a hopeful environment. And they had purchased several of my paintings through the Hammond Harkins gallery. And, relatively good, small to medium size, similar to probably the ones over there, for certain spots. And they had asked me that they had one wall that they just weren't sure about. Would it be okay if I just threw an extra one in there for him? And I said, of course, it's fine. Of course you can. You've already bought so many, so I'm okay with that. And they said, but we'd like you to come out and look at it and take a tour, and they were very gracious. And I'm thinking, it's not a big deal. I don't mind. It's the least I can do. So they came out, and I came to them, and they actually bought me lunch, and we had a nice lunch, and then they reviewed the blueprints of the building and all the rooms, and gave me an overview. And there was a wall on the blueprints that was about this long, and it said reserved for Paul Hamilton. And I didn't really say anything. I'm like, wow, that's a big wall. And you could see other little paintings, Paul Hamilton here, little arrows, but this thing was like that long. And so I didn't really say much. Maybe it's like, I want you to see the hospital, get the feel for it. So we went to the top floor, and then we started working our way down. I'm thinking, well, where's this big wall? And then we'd done the whole hospital, and I didn't see it. So I just, you don't know how to. He's like, well, let's walk into the front lobby, and he's like, it's that wall right there, and it's right in the very front lobby when you first walk into this. They have a 30-foot long wall that. I don't know if they just couldn't decide what to put on it, or if they couldn't afford, or what it turned out to be. But they're like, please help us, because we're at a loss. We don't have an idea. And I had already talked to them about my themes of like landscape and locality, like maybe a nice landscape painting, an uplifting view of maybe the farms where they grow I think it's called Hope's Garden, where they grow cancer preventative plants and vegetables. I'm not too good at that, but so they seem to be really open to that idea. But I was like, I just need to think about this for a long time, and they said, take your time, just come back with an idea. And so meanwhile, parallel to this whole experience, I have been teaching at a school that I'm the art director for, and the founder of the school had found out over Thanksgiving that she had lung cancer. And this was devastating news, of course, because lung cancer is not a good cancer to have. And I don't think any of them are, but it's not one of the better ones as far as prognosis. She was advanced stage. Her whole lung was affected, and she was going to have to begin treatment. And it was like kind of like, you're going to have to take care of the school while I'm doing this stuff. We have other people to help. I certainly didn't do it by myself, but. So I stuck with her and helped her, and she would text me every so often, I'm not feeling good today, or I'm doing better. I walked around a little bit because the chemo was wiping her out. She actually got on a test chemo program that they've never done before. Only 110 people have done this, so it's a total test. So she didn't have to pay for anything. It was all like we'll see what we can do. And long story short, at the end of her treatment there, she texted me a text, and it said, "Paul, I had treatment today and received awesome news. I am in complete remission, which means there are no physical signs of disease. God's grace has led me through the storm, and now I have beautiful blue skies again." And that's from Annie Cacciato. So out of nowhere, in less than 4 months, her cancer was eliminated. And she sent me that text, and it just came to my mind when, if you can look at her little text, I highlighted, I have blue, beautiful skies again. And I got this idea that I could do this. This is a 30-foot long mural. I don't know if anyone can see it. So that's a person there, probably me, while I'm working on this. And I'm going to do this. It's 30 feet long from here to here, and it's going to end up being 108 16 by 16 inch individual paintings that will make up the entire painting. And this is related to her blue, beautiful skies, so I got the clouds in there. And it's a very hopeful and uplifting painting. And I think it's going to work well in the space. The fields are the Hope Garden over at OSU. And it's really, to me, I had done a painting like this, and I like the idea of sort of breaking up the painting, getting away from some of the more traditional approaches of painting that I've been so involved in for so long, and trying to expand my views and my visions as far as what painting could be and what landscape painting could be, because landscape painting is a very old art form, and how can I make that new? And so these two events with my good friend Annie and her good news, the feeling of helping out and contributing, the idea that I had a way to help, because we all feel a little bit helpless when it comes to big things like cancer. We can do the best we can, but I really feel that I'm doing a good thing. And I have got all my materials ready, and I'm going to start, and now we're going to start documenting it. So we have a good documentation of this process. This will be the biggest painting I've ever done by far. It's 30 feet long and 8 feet tall, so I just like to share that.
When is the center going to open? Will it be there when it opens?
It should be there when it opens. It'll be sometime in October. So, I think it's a little fluid as far as the actual opening date. They might have patients, but it might not be considered open to public. Research might start before patients come in there. It's so multidimensional. Sections may open before the full thing's open. So we'll keep you posted. And it's an exciting project. It's probably the most daunting task I've ever done. I've done a lot of crazy stuff in my life, right, Penny? So this will be good, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, it's been an amazing journey with Paula, and I've been privileged to be a part of it. It's been intriguing, it's been creative,
Intriguing.
and I want to, intriguing, it has been.
That's me.
Because his mind works, you know, I can be driving with him and he'll say, look at that. Well, where? He sees things that he's constantly creating. That mind never stops. Well, thank you all for coming. It's been wonderful.